Yo, what is up guys? Boy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. So this weekend on the undercard of Terence Crawford versus Aegis Kavalauskas, we have a tremendous fight going down at lightweight. Richard Commey versus Teofimo Lopez will be taking place, and obviously this is for Richard Commey's IBF lightweight title. For me, this is just a really intriguing fight. Is the champion Richard Commey just too tough, just too rugged and too powerful for the younger prospect Teofimo Lopez? Or will Lopez's athletic ability, his explosiveness and power of his own, will that be enough for him to become the new champion? There's a lot to consider here. It's a great style clash. I really can't see this being a bad fight. Both guys can punch, both guys like to be fairly aggressive, and both guys are strong lightweights. So I really anticipate a good fight here. I think there's a high chance of a knockout. Whoever wins, I think it could be back and forth. Should be a really, really good watch. And I've got to say, when thinking about this fight, I've always been torn, but I've always kind of leaned towards Richard Commey. However, as the fights got closer, I am kind of doubting that now, and I will reveal all when I make my final pick at the end of the video. But let's briefly run through the tale of the tape. We will start with the champion, Richard Commey. He has a record of 29 wins, 2 defeats, 0 draws. 26 of his 29 wins come by way of knockout. Teofimo Lopez has a perfect record of 14-0, 11 of his 14 wins coming by way of knockout. Both guys are orthodox fighters, just for the record. Richard Commey, he is listed as 5'8" with a 71-inch reach, whereas Teofimo Lopez is also listed as 5'8", but he has a 68.5-inch reach. So Richard Commey does actually have a 2.5-inch reach advantage going into this fight. Could that play a role on fight night? Potentially, providing Richard Commey fights in a certain style. But both guys are big lightweights. However, as you can see by the records, Commey has fought a lot more fights in the pro ranks. He's older and he's just more experienced. He's actually quite battle tested at this point. So for example, he's fought guys like Ray Beltran, Denis Shafikov, Robert Easter Jr. He's fought some decent guys, whereas Teofimo Lopez, through his rise, he's fought some decent fringe level guys like Diego Magdaleno and Edis Tatley, and also Nakatani, but I don't think he's fought the level of competition that Richard Commey has. He's not as experienced and he's not as battle tested. In a tough fight, Richard Commey knows what that feels like. He was in wars with Denis Shafikov and Robert Easter Jr. In fact, I actually felt he beat Robert Easter Jr. for the record. But regardless, my point is, he's more battle tested and he's got more experience. He knows what it takes in a really hard fight. Whereas Teofimo Lopez hasn't really been in that position. He's kind of had things his own way. And his toughest fight to date was his last fight against Nakatani, the Japanese fighter. And yes, that was a tough fight, but more of a tough fight stylistically, not a tough physical fight. Lopez was just having a hard time getting behind the straight punches of Nakatani. He was having a hard time figuring out the puzzle. Not that it was physically tough or daunting, it was more of a style clash. So Lopez hasn't gone through that really hard war type fight. Not to say that he can't, but we've not seen it, and we've seen Richard Commey do it. So like I say, from an experience perspective, you've got to give it to Commey. And in a fight like this, that can make all the difference, especially when a young prospect's involved. I mean, Teofimo Lopez is still only 22 years old, and like I say, he's only had 14 fights. I mean, I wouldn't have complained if they wanted more seasoning, to be quite honest, a couple of more learning fights before they stepped into this type of fight, because it's a massive step up, and it's certainly a risky one. But, let's talk about the style breakdown. Well, first and foremost, both guys are punchers, and theoretically that leaves little room for error. Both guys can get tagged, both guys can get overzealous, and both guys do get aggressive, so from that perspective, it should make a really good fight. Richard Commey is obviously the longer man, and he fights in that style a little bit more. He's more upright behind a nice tight guard, and you'll see that with a lot of Ghanaian fighters. You know, I mean, I recall Joshua Clottey, for example, really good tight high guard, and he would throw jabs out of that guard and then set up his power punches, similar to Joseph Agbeko as well. He brings that type of style, you know, really tough. He'll try and walk you down behind that high guard, and he'll try and beat you up, basically. He'll try and knock you out. That's his style, and for a young prospect like Teofimo Lopez, that could be daunting. But, you know, Richard Commey, you know, he's a good fighter, don't get me wrong. He's a big guy featherweight, he can punch, he's got solid enough fundamentals, but he is a little predictable at times. He'll throw the same combinations, the jab right hand, left hook. He'll try and go down to the body now and again. He can also sit on the inside and trade, but he does do the same thing kind of over and over. And against a guy like Teofimo Lopez, a guy who's a bit more unpredictable with his attacks, maybe that could play into Teofimo Lopez's hands. If Lopez can get a gauge for what Richard Commey is doing, how he's coming in, what punches he's throwing, then, you know, then obviously Teofimo Lopez can, you know, create some angles and set up his shots based on Richard Commey's patterns of attack. And Lopez has that ability, in my opinion. Not that he's shown it tremendously in his career, but I think he's got the athleticism to pull something like that off. And, you know, that's the key here. Can Teofimo Lopez make the most of his quicker reactions, his quicker feet, his quicker hands against the more upright, slower Richard Commey? I think that's the question here. I think, you know, Teofimo Lopez in this fight probably needs to be a bit more cautious in his attacks, and he needs to utilise that jab a lot more than he does, because Teofimo Lopez kind of leads with power shots, you know, big right hands or big left hooks or even uppercuts. He'll lead with power shots. And against Commey, yes, that could have success because of how Commey fights, because of how upright he is. But, you know, you'd like to see Teofimo fight more behind a jab in this fight, try and maintain some range, and, you know, try to set up his work with the jab also. You know, again, give Richard Commey different looks. Use that athleticism, but also use those fundamentals. Use a jab to try and set your work up, and use a jab to try and keep Commey at bay. And I actually expect Lopez to box more in this fight than we've seen him before. I think he would have learned a lot from his last fight with Nakatani. You know, he struggled with Nakatani's jab. Maybe it's time Lopez needs to implement his jab in his fights. And I could see him doing that in this bout. You know, just a bit more, not more cautious, but just more fundamentally correct. And if he can make those adjustments, you know, pay a little bit more attention to defense, use that jab, and then combine that with his power and athleticism, then I think he's got a great chance of winning this fight. If he doesn't do that and he gets sucked into a war against the teak tough Richard Commey, then there's a good chance Teofimo Lopez loses this fight and maybe gets knocked out. So, you know, Lopez needs to fight a good fight, and he needs to step it up from his previous performances. Do I believe he can do that? I think so. I really do. You know, he's the home fighter. He's the promotional A-side, I guess, and he's the guy Top Rank wants to win. So, I mean, he will have the advantages in his favour in terms of scoring and things like that. So, if it's a competitive fight and it goes the distance, you would imagine it's going to get awarded to Teofimo Lopez. So you have to take that into account. But I do believe he can make the adjustments to win this fight and win it fairly. And he's got the athleticism offset some of what Commey does. Teofimo Lopez at times is flat-footed, but other times he will move a little bit more. You know, he'll try and get in and out and things like that. If Lopez can actually, again, just, you know, increase that foot movement a bit more in this bout, so he doesn't give Richard Commey a chance to set his punches, then, again, that's going to play into his favour. Richard Commey's a guy who, you know, kind of needs to set his feet to punch, whereas Lopez, he does the same, but I think he's got more scope to punch on the move in comparison to Richard Commey. So what I'm trying to say is, if Teofimo Lopez combines his athletic advantage over Commey with some, you know, better fundamentals, I believe he'll win this fight. It's just really whether he's got the temperament and experience to do that. That is the risky thing about this fight, picking Lopez, is the experience factor. Having said that, I do believe Lopez wins this fight. I'm not confident, and I'm not really sure how in regards to knockout or points, but I think Lopez wins, but, that's not a confident pick. I really wouldn't be surprised if Commey wins this fight and knocks Lopez out, because like I say, if Lopez gets drawn into a war, like a machismo battle, then there's every chance he could get knocked out. I don't think Commey can outbox Teofimo Lopez, to be honest with you. I think if he wins this fight, Commey is going to stand and bang and either knock Lopez out or beat him up, fairly impressively over 12 rounds. I can't really see Commey outboxing Teofimo Lopez. So I'm leaning towards Lopez to win this fight. That's my pick. I'm picking Lopez to win. No method of victory. I'm just saying Lopez will win this fight. That's my official prediction. But I've got to say, once again, excellent fight. It's really sad to see this fight go under the radar, to be honest. Stylistically, I really can't see this being a bad fight. I think it's close to a 50-50, to be honest. And yeah, it's on a good card, so fair play to Top Rank. Fair play to both fighters for taking this fight. Hopefully we see the winner fight Vasily Lomachenko. I mean, I see no reason why not. All of these guys are in the same stable, so let's get it on, man. The winner of this fight versus Vasily Lomachenko. That's what I want to see in 2020 for the winner of this fight. Anyway, share your thoughts below. What do you make of this fight? Who are you picking? Are you picking Commey based on the experience? Or are you picking the fresher Teofimo Lopez? I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts. Fire away below. Peace.